We are on the home stretch. You've gone so far, but the marathon's not over yet. We got all kinds of advanced and cool things to show you that you probably didn't know you can do with this controller. You ready? Let's close it out. All right, so now that we've covered the essential features of the S4, we're about to blast off into full-on tractor mode and become tractor masters of the universe. So I'm going to show you some more advanced tractor features now. The first one being the remix decks. So the remix decks are a special kind of deck in Tractor that allow you to save and store your own remix decks, and you can have up to 64 loops or one-shots saved within a single deck. You can use them for all kinds of different things. For example, scratch DJs can have all of their scratch samples loaded into a single deck for quick access to just scratch any sample they want right on the fly. Or you could have just a simple remix deck with a kick drum loop, a clap, and a hi-hat. So if you come to a breakdown in your song, you can quickly put the kick drum in or put a clap in to keep the energy up. There's all kinds of different use cases. We have artists like Danny Tenaglia who are taking all their classic vinyl and disco tracks and cutting loops out of them and making their own remix decks out of loops, something I'm going to show you. Also, we have a free remix deck that you can download from Moldover, which has a bunch of different guitar samples, so you can play the remix decks like a guitar. All right, so let's get into all these kind of use cases. So first of all, if you want to download your own free remix sets, you can go to the Native Instruments website and download a zip file of a bunch of different remix decks. Check the description below for the link. So first, let's have a look at the remix decks in Tractor. First, I'm going to import a remix deck into my collection. I can do that just by clicking and dragging a remix set from my Finder into the track collection. And now you can see that it's importing all the samples from the remix deck, and you're going to find this remix deck located under Track Collection, All Remix Sets. And there it is. And of course, we can load a remix deck into a deck just like we would a regular track, just by using our Shift Right command or using the browse encoder to load. Okay, so now that we have a remix deck loaded into deck A, let's have a look how it's arranged. So on the first page, we have 16 visible loops and one-shots. So loops are a sound that repeats over and over again, and one-shots will trigger the first time you push the pad, and then it will just play until the end and then stop. So this first page has 16 samples, but there's actually 4 pages, so we can click on the page button here to see all 64 samples. And we have 4 columns and 4 rows. You can only play 1 sample per column at a time. Whenever I trigger the sample, it's going to be loaded into the remix deck slot, which you see here. So you're going to see the waveform appear in the remix deck slot. So the remix deck also has its own independent master clock. So all the loops and samples that are synced will sync to the remix deck's slot. And then you can additionally sync the remix deck to Tractor's master clock. Okay, now let's take a look at the S4 and talk about how the remix decks work on the S4. So to play a sample in the remix deck, I'm going to click on one of these top 4 pads, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you can hear I have this kick and drum sample playing. I'll trigger another sample. Now I have 3 loops going. And you can see here I have an arrow for the 4th sample, so that means it's a one-shot. If I want to change the sample, I can use pads 5, 6, or 7, and 8. I'm just going to hold the pad below the sample I want to change and then turn the browse encoder. And you can see I have the browser list of all the samples in that column. And then I'll trigger it. Okay, now if I want to mute any of these samples, I can hold the mute button right up here and then just push the sample that I want to mute. And I can also control things like volume and filter directly on the S4. So if I hold the pad below the sample I want to edit, you can see I have a volume and filter control that shows up. So the move encoder will control the volume. And the loop encoder will change the filter. So if I turn the filter to the right, we have a high pass filter. If it's in the center, that means it's unaffected. And as I turn the filter to the left, we have a low pass filter, which allow only the low frequencies to pass through. And one other feature that you can control directly on the S4 with the remix decks is the quantize mode. So you can actually see if quantize is turned on or off right here where the number 4 is. So quantize will make sure that it waits a certain number of beats before triggering the sample. For example, if I have the quantize on 1 beat, it'll wait for the next downbeat before restarting the sample. So I'll change the quantize to 1 beat here. And you can see every time I trigger this on a beat, it jumps to the beginning. Or if I have 4 beats turned on, it's going to wait for the next one of a measure to re-trigger. So I can turn quantize on or off, or I can use the loop encoder with the shift button held down to change the quantize value. And another cool thing is that you can actually control the remix deck just like you would a regular track deck, meaning I can scratch it, I can loop it, I can even beat jump, things like that. Okay, so now we talked about how to play remix sets, but how do you make remix sets? I want to show you all a secret Traktor weapon. This is something that was made popular and used heavily by artists like Danny Tenaglia and Felix the House Cat. And basically, with the remix decks, you can cut your own homemade loops out of your own track library and use them in the remix decks. For example, you could take a bunch of loops from tracks that are in the same key and make a remix deck for that key, or you could have all of your acapellas and put those all in a single remix deck. So let's have a look at how to do it. Okay, so I have this classic Chiapet track loaded. A lot of you might recognize this track. And I want to capture a part of the intro as a loop and drag it to a remix deck so I can use that sample in any of my sets. So I'm going to play the track here. I'm going to find the section of the song that I want to loop. I'm just going to set a loop. Let's try right here. And now that I have that loop, I'm just going to click on the deck header kind of next to the track title and just drag it into one of these empty remix deck slots. And now I've captured that loop. And just to show you, I'll trigger it on the remix deck, pad 4. Awesome. And as soon as I play this sample 3 times, as soon as it repeats 3 times, you're gonna see this bar flash at the bottom of my screen telling you that it's actually saved that to my sample library. Now let's do the same thing with a couple other tracks. You all remember that David Morales track before, how I love that 8-beat drum intro? Let's capture that. So I'm going to play this track, set a loop. Select the length I want. And you just saw how the sample just saved with that bar at the bottom. So now I'm just going to click the deck header and drag it. The other thing I can do is I could actually just click a pad. All right, so I'm just gonna click and drag the deck header here into the sample slot, and now we have 2 samples to work with. I'm gonna browse up here to the top sample. Okay, now let's just do one more. Let's try Sharam the Rain.
Stolen from your tongue.
Set the loop. Drag it.
Stolen from your tongue.
Okay, cool. So now I got a few different loops. I'm just gonna browse up here to the top cell.
Stolen from your tongue.
Okay.
Stolen from your tongue.
Now you can kind of hear how the vocals pitched up a little bit. I don't want that. I want the key to be locked. Something to mention, if I hover my mouse over the remix decks here up the top, you can see we have on-off buttons for key lock, effects, and headphone monitor. So I'm just going to turn on key lock for that second sample. Also, you remember our filter. I'm going to turn the filter up a bit for that Sharam sample so that we don't have the kick drum coming through. And now let's hear it. So we just taken 3 different songs and made a remix deck out of them. If I want, I can name this remix deck. I'll call it the S4 Mega Remix Set. And if I want to save it, I can just click on the arrow underneath the deck letter and say Save Remix Deck. All right, so I've just created a remix deck out of homemade samples. Now, here's something you all might not have known. If I go to all samples and I scroll down, you can see all the samples that I've saved from remix decks, and down here at the bottom, these are the samples that I just created. And if I control click on any of these samples and say show in Finder, you can actually see that it's saved all these samples as WAV files. So now we actually have a perfectly beat gridded sample from our track as a WAV file. Is this triggering some ideas? I hope so. And we have some parameters here for each cell that we can customize. So if I click on any of these cells, you can see the parameters for that. So you could change the gain. If the sample is not loud enough, you can raise the gain of the sample, each individual sample. You can change the pitch by adjusting the pitch knob by 1 semitone at a time here by clicking the plus and minus. You also have parameters like sync, so you can choose if the sample is synced or not synced. You can change it from a loop to a one-shot, or you can even put the sample in reverse mode. And then you have additionally a playback mode, so you can change it from latch mode to trigger mode. And that's the remix decks in Traktor. Okay, so now we're gonna merge the worlds of digital and analog together, and I'm gonna show you how to use the turntables with the S4. So first I'm gonna show you how to plug the turntables into the S4 and use your favorite records out of your vinyl collection without the need for a computer, since the S4 has a mixer built into it. And then I'm gonna talk about how to use time-coded vinyl with Traktor. So this is a special time-coded record that I can use to control the decks of Traktor. So I have all the advanced functions of Traktor, such as cue points, loops, hot cues, sync, things like that. And with that, I have access to my whole entire music collection that's on my computer using only 2 time-coded records. So I don't have to lug gigantic crates of records around with me. I just have everything right on my laptop, ready to scratch, ready to mix, and play. Now let's set up our turntables with Traktor. All right, so now that I have the turntable here, let's talk about how to plug it in. So you see I have 2 RCA inputs for each channel on the S4. Channels A and B have phono preamps built into them, so I could plug a turntable into channel A or B. Channels C and D do not have phono preamps built into them, but if my turntables have phono preamps, then I could plug into channels C or D. All right, so now I'm going to plug in the turntable. I've plugged the power supply of the turntable into a power outlet, and I'm going to take the RCA cable of the turntable and plug it into either channels A or B. And next, I'm going to take the ground wire from the back of the turntable, and I'm going to connect that to the ground socket here on the back of the S4. So I'm going to unscrew it and just make sure that this metal part is attached, and then screw it back in. Now I'm going to turn on the S4. Okay, so now to get the signal from the turntable into the S4, I'm going to hit the EXT button on the S4, and that's going to make that channel a live input. Now it's important to change the input mode on the S4 to phono. I can do that by holding Shift and pushing EXT, and you can see how I can toggle that between line and phono. I want phono. Now I'm going to take my favorite record, I'm going to place it on the turntable. And now you can hear we're getting sound. If you want to use time-code vinyl to control the Traktor decks, you can buy these special time-coded vinyls separately on the Native Instruments website. This is a really cool technology which allows me to use this time-coded record to control the decks. All right, so time-coded vinyl is a revolutionary technology that allows me to use this special time-coded record to control the decks in Traktor. And when I place the needle on any of these grooves, Traktor knows exactly the time I place the needle at, the speed of the record, and the direction. And each side of this record is a little different. So side A has 15 different grooves. So if I place the needle on groove 3, that's signifying I'm dropping the needle at minute 3 on the record. And the B side has 10 grooves, so that's a 10-minute record. So we have 3 zones on this record here. We have what's called the lead-in, and that will actually skip to the section right before the start of the song to give me a little bit of time before I get to that first beat. So we have the lead-in, and then we have the playback zone here, which has the grooves. And then right in the middle, we actually have a special browsing zone where we can drop the needle in the middle of the record here, and we can actually scroll through our tracks in the browser using the record. So I'm going to place this record here on the turntable, and let's see how to set it up. So if I go to the Traktor preferences, I'm just going to make sure my audio settings are set up correctly. So if I go to Preferences Audio Setup, we can see I have the Traktor Control S4 MK3 selected as our sound card. And our output routing is in internal mode. Now for the input routing, for each deck, we want to make sure our inputs are set up correctly. So we've already set up the line phono inputs for channels A and B for decks A and B. I don't have anything connected to deck C, so I have these set to not connected. I'm also going to choose not connected for input effects send. Okay, and just to check that I'm getting signal coming in, I can put the needle, let's just put the needle anywhere on the record here, and we can see that I have input coming into deck A. Okay, now I'm going to set the deck to scratch control mode. Now I'm going to make sure that the deck is set to be a track deck. So I'm going to set the deck to track deck. But to note, you can control the remix decks or stems using the record. And then underneath the letter A, I can click this little arrow here, and I'm going to choose scratch control. This will enable scratch control. Now some other settings I want to check. If I go to Preferences, Timecode Setup, I can also set up the inputs to be scratch control here as well in this window. And now if I go to Preferences, Decks Layout, I can show what's called the scope. And the scope is going to tell me everything I need to know about the incoming timecode signal. So under Preferences, Decks Layout, Platter Scope, I'm going to choose Scope. Now I'm going to close the preferences here. Let's load up a track. So now when I put the needle on the record, have a look at this scope window here that's showing in the decks. This is going to show me the input signal that's coming in. So I'm going to hit Calibrate to calibrate the decks. You might not even need to do this. So I put the needle on the record, and instantly you see we have a signal coming in. It's almost a perfect circle, or 2 circles, and that means we have a healthy signal coming in. Now, to troubleshoot any issues that are going on with the timecode signal, you can just look at the scope. So let's say the scope is a vertical line. It looks like this. That means that one channel is disconnected. And it will even tell me in the scope, left channel missing. And the same goes for the right channel. The right channel missing would be a horizontal line. And if you see a lot of crazy static that looks unnecessary, maybe check the ground wire and make sure that's connected properly. All right, now our deck is properly calibrated. And if we want to, we can even hide this scope just by clicking on the scope window, and now we have this view here where we just see a line rotating around in circles. Additionally, if I want to not even see any of that, I can go to Scope View and click on this little arrow to hide the scope, and then I can open it up anytime I want to. So to go to the beginning of the track, I'm going to pick up the needle and put it on the lead-in section here and see how it's jumped before the start point. And let's see if we have some sound. Okay, the song's really fast. I'm going to put the turntable at 33 RPM. And let's try that again. All right, so now we're using the deck to control Traktor's decks. I can speed it up, slow it down, and that speed change will be reflected in Traktor. And just to show you how the browsing zone works real quick, I can drop the needle on the browsing zone, and now I can rotate the record, and you can see I'm actually scrolling through my playlist here, forwards and backwards. And as soon as I find the record that I want to load, I stop the record, and it's loaded into the deck, and then I can just put the needle back at the beginning of the song. And play it. All right, so there's 2 different kinds of playback modes when using time-coded vinyl. There's absolute mode and there's relative mode. And those are signified by these 2 icons here. So the absolute mode icon is the icon with the turntable arm on it. And what that means is that whatever time I put the needle on the record, it's going to match that exact time in Traktor. And if I switch to relative mode, that means I can use things like hot cues, loops, and things like that, but still have the feeling of the vinyl. I can even use sync with the vinyl. Now, if I was in absolute mode, for example, and I set a loop, it's going to automatically switch to relative mode. Because now the speed matches, right? Speed matches, but the time of the record does not match the decks because I just set a loop. And another thing that relative mode can be great for, let's say I'm in a club with a lot of bass in the DJ booth and the turntables kind of bouncing around. Relative mode will help save me from the needle jumping around. It'll save me from skipping the track, since the song will continue to play even if the turntable's skipping. And let's just, let's have a look at that. Now we're in absolute mode, skipping. Still continues to play back. Of course, got a little pause there when it jumped up in the air, but that was about it. Right, so that's how to use timecode vinyl with the Traktor Control S4. Now you can get the old school feel of real DJing using turntables, but have the added live remixing power of Traktor. All right, so now let's talk about some settings that you want to check when using timecode vinyl with the Traktor Control S4. So if I go to Preferences here, Timecode Setup, there's a bunch of settings here that I can use. In the timecode input section, we can see a couple things. First of all, we can see the incoming input signal coming into the decks. This is the same as the scope. We can also see the level that we're getting from the needles. So the higher the input level, the better. And it's a really important thing to get some needles or cartridges that have a high output. There's actually digital DJ needles out there if you look around on the internet. So you want to have a good signal coming into Traktor. So down below, there's some other settings like track start position. This will decide which groove on the record is associated with 000, the beginning of a song. So let's say I've been using this record for years and the first groove is worn out. I can change the track start position to say 1 minute. And now that will allow me to put the needle on the next groove to go to the beginning. Turntable speed 45 RPM. That's good for if you like to play with your turntables at 45 RPM. Just make sure to change them here. Tracking alert will give me just important notifications and alerts if something's going wrong with my input signal, such as right channel missing. Now, here's a cool pro tip. Load next track when flipping record. This is an awesome feature for timecode vinyl users because what will happen is if I flip the record, it's going to load the next song in my playlist. Just to note that you have to be playing out of a Traktor playlist for this to work. Let's see it in action. So I'm playing a track here. As soon as I take the needle off and flip the track, it's going to load the next song in the playlist. So this can be very handy for like turntablists who have a preset routine and they don't want to go to the computer each time they change the song. It'll just load the next song for them. Then we have some other settings such as use playlist scrolling zone, which we already talked about. That's that third section of the record. We can also switch to absolute mode in lead-in. So switch to absolute mode in the lead-in means when I put the needle on the lead-in part of the record, it'll automatically switch to absolute mode. And then additionally, we can set it so it automatically switches to absolute mode whenever we load a track. So it's always starting in absolute mode. And then skip to start in lead-in, I have that turned on. So if I ever want to go to the beginning of the song, I just put the needle at the beginning of the record. And I'm at the beginning of the song. Okay, let's say I want to actually record my vinyl to my computer and digitize my vinyl. I can actually do that in Traktor. So first I just have to set it up in the preferences. If I go to Preferences, Input Routing, I'm just going to make sure the input of deck A is set to A line phono and 2 AR line phono. And you can see how deck B is set up as well. And then I'm going to go to Preferences, Mix Recorder, and I'm going to set the source to internal. I'm going to play the song. Let's go to my audio recorder. And now you can see we have input going into the audio recorder, and then I'm just going to record it. Of course, when you're recording, make sure you have a good signal, make sure your needle's clean, your record's clean, and just avoid any possible pops or clicks that you can get. But if you do get them, you can clean them up with Isotope RX. So by using the time-coded vinyl with Traktor, you now have access to your entire music library. For me, over 10,000 songs, but only using 2 records. So I don't have to travel with gigantic cases of vinyl to my gigs. I just bring my interface, some cables, the time-coded records, and Traktor, and I can have the full potential of Traktor, but still have the old school feel of vinyl. Okay, now let's talk about recording in Traktor. So one thing I tell people is to always record your sets. You never know when you're going to play the set of your life or do something magical, even in your own bedroom. So record as much as you can so you can study back your sets later on and learn from your sets. So I'm going to walk you through the process of how to set up recording and how to record. And then from there, I'm going to talk about how to access past sets that you've played in your history archive, and also how to print out your set lists or even upload them to sites like Mixcloud. So first I'm going to go into the preferences and get everything set up. So if I go to Preferences, quick review, we're using the TRAKTOR Control S4 as our sound card. Our output routing is in internal mode, meaning we're using Traktor's internal mixer. Now I'm going to go down to the mix recorder preferences, and where it says source, I have internal and external. So internal recording is if you're recording inside the box, inside of Traktor, using Traktor's internal mixer, which we are because we're controlling that with the S4. External mode would be if you're using an external DJ mixer or an external sound card with Traktor. So we have internal selected, and then I'm going to choose where I want to save the recording to. So by default, it's Music Traktor Recordings, but you can see that I've actually changed my location to the desktop. To change the location, you just click on this 3 dots here, and then you can find your location, desktop. Now under that, we have the option to split file at size. By default, I believe it's 650 megabytes. I like to change mine to 2048 megabytes, and that will be about just a little bit over 3 hours of audio. So once I have that set up, now I'm going to take a look at the audio recorder in Traktor, where we can set our recording levels and record our sets. The audio recorder is located in the global section, and if you see this little icon here, the tape icon, that's our audio recorder. So in the audio recorder, we have a recording volume. We also have a recording button and this broadcast button here as well, which we're not going to talk about in this video. So before I start recording, what I like to do is called a recording sound check, where I'll just play 2 songs, preferably at their loudest point. Basically, I want to give Traktor the hottest signal I'm going to put into it while I'm DJing live, and then adjust the recording volume so that it's not clipping. You never want to hit the reds when you're recording. So let's do that. I'm going to go to the middle of the track. And I'm going to go to the middle of this track as well. All right, so I'm letting both songs play. I'm getting the gains where I want them. Maybe I'll even push the gains a little bit just to give myself some safety room here. And now I'm going to use the recorder's gain to adjust the recording level. Now, if I turn it up too much, you can see how it's hitting red here. So you want to turn it down. I like to give myself plenty of room. So keep in mind that you can always make your recordings louder if they're too quiet, but once you hit reds, there's really no fixing it, unless you have Isotope RX, of course. So I got a good level coming in, and now I'm going to just hit record to start recording. Okay, So I'm going to hit stop whenever I'm done recording. And now you'll be able to find that recording file and the location that I set in the preferences, such as my desktop. And I can also find the recording in the browser tree under audio recordings. So you see there it is. I could even load that recording into a deck if I wanted to. So that's how to record in Traktor. So next I'm going to show you where you can access all of your past DJ sets and also the current set list in the session that I have open in Traktor. So if I go to the history playlist, which is down here at the bottom of the tree, I can see everything that I've played in this session, so since I've opened Traktor. If I close Traktor and reopen that, the history playlist will be cleared. And I could, if I want, select all these tracks and drag that to a playlist. But let's say I just played the set of my life last night and I want to go back and see what I played. Traktor automatically saves every set you play. And you can find that. It's a little bit hidden, but it's under Explorer, Archive. When I open this up, you can see I have sets dating all the way back to 2014 that I can go back and see what I played. So I'm just going to scroll down here to the bottom of the list, find a set that I played. There's a set right there. All right, and you can see the format of the playlist. It has history _ year, month, day, time. Okay, so if you remember the date that you played the set, you can actually go find that really easily. Now, if I want to save that history as a playlist, I can control-click on it and say import to playlists. And then what I like to do is just change the name to something like year, month, day. I'll type Berghain and then the city. And hit OK. And now it's saved your set as a playlist in Traktor. And then if I'm ever in a jam and I'm like wondering what to play, I could always go back to an amazing set that I played in the past and just kind of dig through that. And a lot of DJs do that and play that way. Let's say I want to now upload the set to SoundCloud, for example. So I would upload the set, and then to get the set list, I can just control-click on this playlist here and say Save as Web Page. And what this is going to do is it's going to save a printable text HTML file that I can just copy and paste into any text editor. So in this window here, I can choose the things that I want to show in the track listing. So I'm just going to unselect everything I don't need. Typically, I choose artist, title, label, and maybe genre. So I'm just going to unselect everything else. All right, and once I'm done with that, I can reorder things if I want to. So I'm going to go artist, title, label, genre. I'm going to choose the destination that I want to save this set list to. So let's just choose the desktop. And then hit OK. And now you can see it automatically opens up your set list in a web browser. And you can just go here and copy all this information and paste it into TextEdit, for example. And then just write out your track listing and then paste that in your SoundCloud description. Now, for those of you who are Mixcloud users, Mixcloud actually has a Traktor.nml import function, so you don't have to type out your entire track listing or copy and paste. You can just upload the set list and it'll do the track listing for you. So here's how to do that. If I control-click on the playlist and say Export Playlist, I'm going to choose the destination where I want to save it to. Let's do the desktop again. You can change the name if you want. So the export format, you're going to want to choose NML. NML is Traktor's format. But if I wanted to, I could also choose M3U, which can be used with Apple Music. I'm going to uncheck Copy Tracks to Destination, because that will actually copy the songs to that folder. And then I'm going to hit OK. And now it's exported a .nml file, which I can then just upload to Mixcloud or any other platform that supports .nml. So that's how to record your sets in Traktor, how to export your printable track lists, and how to export your NML file. So remember what I said, record everything. You never know when the magic's going to happen. Okay, so as we further blast off into Traktor land, we're now exploring some experimental features, some features that merge the worlds of producer and DJ together. I'm going to introduce you to stems. Stems are a special kind of file format. It's an open audio file format. It's made by Native Instruments, but you can actually use it in any program that supports it. A stem is a file with the file extension .stem.mp4. And what it is basically is a container that contains 5 files. It contains the stereo master and then the 4 stems parts, which can be any 4 musical elements. Usually it's something like drums, bass, synths, vocals, effects, things like that. And it's up to the producer or the label to decide which 4 parts they want to include. So if you took a stems file and you loaded it into, say, Apple Music or any program that doesn't support stems, it will play the stereo master. But if you drag a stems file into a program that does support it, such as Traktor, it will split the song into the 4 musical elements, and you can interact with each musical element individually, adding things like EQ or filters to each stem part individually, and even effects. So I'm going to get into how to use the stems on the S4. So first I'm going to load a stems file into Traktor. So I'm just going to drag a file from my Finder into Traktor here. It's necessary to analyze the file before you load it into the deck because there's a lot of data to be processed. So I'm just going to Control-click and choose Analyze if it hasn't been analyzed already. And now to load a stems file into a deck, I'm just going to navigate to my All Stems folder, find the song that I want to load, and then just drag it into the deck, just like that. And now I'm just going to find another stems file and load that as well. All right, so now I have a couple stem songs loaded into both decks. Now on the S4, we have a special stems mode. So if I click the stems button, I'm now in stems mode on the bottom performance pad section. And this has functions where I can mute, I can control the filter, volume, and other things with the stems. Now, something to know about stems is that you can play them exactly like a track deck, meaning I can scratch them, save and set and trigger hot cues, loops, and basically anything that I can do with a deck. But then I have the additional power to mute, solo, or interact with any of these musical parts live. So in theory, if I was a turntablist, I could be scratching and muting and soloing different parts of my tracks. There's all kinds of possibilities of things that you can do. So I just played a song. This is Dubfire Exit. And you can see that all 4 pads are bright, which means that it's playing the full stereo master of the song if I don't have anything muted. Right? Let's kind of skip ahead in the song. So if I want to mute any of these parts, I can just push the pad that I want to mute. I just muted the drums. Now I just have the vocals playing through. I can take the vocals out, the drums out. All right, so let's have a look at how the stems look inside of the Traktor software. So if you look at the deck here, you can see that I have the 4 stems, and I have all 4 stems names. So we have drums, bass, synths, and vocals, and they're each color-coded. So for example, the synths are green, and the pad on the S4 is green. So the colors match the software and the hardware. I can also see the 4 waveforms of the stem. So I can see the drums, bass, synths, and vocals right in the deck. So you can see what's happening, what's coming up. And I have a volume for each stem part. Let's just hear how that sounds.
Show me the way out. Show me the way out.
I also have a filter.
Show me the way.
So if this blue button is on, that means the filter's on.
Show me the way out. Show me the way out. Show me.
Okay, and now I also have effect sends right here. So I can, for each individual stem part, I can turn the effect sends on or off, and then I have an amount for the effects. So if, let's say I only want to put the effects on the vocals, I can turn all of these off and just leave the effects on the vocals. All right, so now let me show you how to use stems on the S4 and all the different controls that we have to interact with our stems files. So I'm actually going to switch to hot cues mode here. Notice how you can actually go back and forth between hot cues and stems, so I can trigger any saved loops or saved hot cues. I highly recommend you save loops to your stems files, because then you can just jam out on certain parts. Let's jump to a certain part of the track, and I'm going to hit play. Okay, I'm going to go back to stems mode. Now, for each stems part, if I hold the pad underneath the stems file that I want to affect, I now have volume and filter on the high resolution display here. I can use the move encoder to control the volume, or I can use the loop encoder to control the filter. All right, so if I go to the vocal, I can filter it out. All right, and just to note, I can do anything with a stems file that I can do with a track deck. I can scratch it, do loops, anything I can do with a track deck. Okay, so now let's do a bit of a live mashup. So I'm going to take a stems file from Dubfire and a stems file from Sharam, and I'm going to mash it together. Here's our deep dish mashup. I'm going to start with the drums muted. I'm going to put the effects only on the vocals. I'm going to beat jump.
Exit. 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 Exit.
So you can hear I use beat jump to correct that phrase mixing issue because I started a beat late.
Exit. Exit.
I'm going to filter out the drums.
Exit. 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 Exit.
Now I just have the vocals of this over the full track here. So there's all kinds of things. You can kind of hear what I'm doing live in the mix. But you know, if I wanted to, I could just mute the drums of everything, and now I have an ambient stems mix. And if you want to hear an ambient stems mix, you can check out my mix on SoundCloud, the world's first ambient stems mix, which I did this live very intuitively. Check it out. All right, so hopefully this will start giving you some ideas of kinds of things that you can do with stems. So with stems, you can do on-the-fly mashups. You can break a song down into an a cappella while breaking the other song down into just the instrumental, and you can do a live mashup of the two songs together. For producers, you can have a whole new way of monetizing your tracks by selling your tracks as stems. So there's all kinds of different use cases. So one of the reasons I think that stems is super exciting is because one thing DJs have always wanted to do is to be able to just mute the drums or mute the bass. And before stems came out, the only way to sort of get rid of the bass is by cutting the low knob, but this is turning down the volume of other instruments as well. And now you can literally just mute the bass. So stems gives DJs a whole new way to perform and interact with their tracks. So definitely check them out, play stems, make stems, enjoy. Okay, so up to this point, we've been using 1 to 2 decks in all of my examples. So now let's blast off into 4-deck mode. So as I mentioned before, the 2 jog wheels on the S4 can control all 4 decks in Traktor. So for the left jog wheel, I can switch between decks A and C, and now everything's going to control deck C. And on the right side, I can switch between decks B and D. And before I show you how I use 4 decks, I'm going to configure the software so we can see all 4 decks in our GUI. So right now we have a 2-deck layout. Some of you might already have a 4-deck layout, so if I click on the layout selector up here in the upper right, you have a bunch of custom layouts that you can choose from. So I have a 4-deck layout, but let's pretend we don't. If I go to a layout, let's say the mixer layout, I can customize this in the preferences. So if I go to Preferences, Decks Layout, I can change the decks from 2 decks to 4 decks. And now we can see all 4. Okay, now I'm going to load up a few songs and do a quick 4-deck mix for you. So I'm going to load into deck A. I'm going to push the deck C, deck select button, load a second song. And then I'm going to load a song into deck B, then switch to deck D and load my 4th song. All right, so let's get in the mix.
Accept. Accept.
So I'm going to put a delay on.
Accept.
A gator. So I just started deck D. I'm going to go back and start deck B. And I'm just going to jump forward by 16 beats to fix the phrasing so it's in line with deck D. I'm going to use my beat jump to jump forwards. I'm going to get deck C ready. Do a bass line swap. I'm going to start bringing in deck D to bring in some melodies. Now I almost have 4 decks playing. I'm going to do a bass line swap into deck C. And now I got all 4 decks playing. And just something to note, when I'm playing on 4 decks, Notice how I use the EQs. You want to be really careful, especially with the lows, so you don't have the lows up for 2 songs, because then the frequencies start colliding. So I have to pay extra special attention to the EQs and also make sure I'm always dropping on the 1 so everything's in phrase with each other. Throw a delay out. All right, and that's just a short and sweet example of a 4-deck mix. So you can see how I was layering stuff on top of each other. I was using my EQs to correct all the frequencies to make sure nothing's overlapping or fighting with each other. And I was using beat jump to jump around through my songs live, using all the tools that we talked about. But just to note, each deck, while we were using track decks in this example, each deck can be a remix deck, a stem, a live input. You know, you could route a turntable through or a microphone through one channel. So there's all kinds of possibilities. You could also just use 4 decks, like maybe use your decks as a placeholder. Like say I see a song that I want to play later on, just drop it in a deck and keep it there for later. Or if you have 2 songs playing and they sound great together, you want to keep them going, you can bring in a 3rd song underneath. Or you could maybe be looping 2 songs to keep the energy going and then, you know, mix an a cappella and a track together. There's all kinds of possibilities. So get in there, get your 4-deck DJing on, have fun. Now I'm going to show you how to set up a microphone with the TRAKTOR Control S4. So the S4 actually has 2 microphone inputs you can use. We have a 1/4-inch input in the back, and we have an XLR combo jack with 1/4-inch in the front. So I'm going to show you how to set up the microphone settings first in the software, and then I'm going to show you how to activate it on the hardware. If we go to the TRAKTOR preferences, first we're going to set up the input routing for deck D. I'm going to set that to D line mic front. And if we want for deck C, we can also engage the line mic for the rear. Now that we've done that, for channels C and D, I can set either one of them to either mic C or mic D by holding the Shift button and pushing the EXT button to toggle to microphone. And now that the EXT button is lit up, I can talk into the microphone. And you can hear that now my voice is coming through deck D. And I can just talk regularly through deck D, or I can add some effects to my voice and make myself sound very big. So that's how to set up a microphone with the TRAKTOR Control S4. Now we have 2 turntables and 2 microphones. Whew. All right, vibe check, everybody. How are you feeling? We just went start to finish, unboxing to we are TRAKTOR masters of the universe, and you know everything about this controller. Now that you know what you know, I hope that you all go off and practice all these skills, but make sure that you bookmark this video so you can come back anytime and refresh your memory on all the hidden tips and tricks that you learned with the S4. Make sure to go to our YouTube channel and check out some of our other How to Do Everything series on Machina, Contact, and some other Native Instruments plugins and hardware. If you want to get into TRAKTOR, you can download a free demo at native-instruments.com. If you want to learn more about me, check out djendo.com. Thank you all for joining me on this marathon. This is Endo. I'm out. Peace.